My daughter yelled, "You're the problem." So I left the house in her ex's name. I was holding a tray of lemon tea and a plate of little almond biscuits when she turned and said it. Her voice had that sharp, flat tone that slices a room right in half. "You're the problem," not a shout, just loud enough that everyone could hear, and no one could pretend they hadn't. Her husband froze. The children went still, like animals sensing the wrong kind of silence. And I stood there with the tray in my hands, still warm from the oven. I'm Marion Lowell. I'm 73. And that was the moment I knew my daughter didn't see me anymore. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. It wasn't the words, it was the way she looked at me. Like I was a barrier she had to get past. Not her mother. Not someone who used to rock her to sleep during her childhood nosebleeds. Or sew little stars into her dance costumes when the other mothers just bought sequins. I used to think if I did everything right, I'd stay safe, I'd stay needed. But something changed along the way, and I didn't notice it happening, not until that day. I put the tray down on the sideboard. Quietly, no drama, I straightened the tea towels. I even smiled the way women are taught to. But inside, something very old in me stood up and left. Not the kind of leaving you can see right away. No packed bags, no door slammed. Just a little shift, a note to self written in bone. I remember thinking, this is how people disappear even when they're still in the room. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed I helped pay for. The house deed with both our names printed neat in the corner drawer. I built that room. I chose the curtains. I painted the floorboards when we couldn't afford to replace them. But suddenly, it felt like I was trespassing in a life that had no space left for me. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the ease, the way she said it like she'd been practicing. And I kept wondering when it happened. When did my daughter stop believing I was on her side? Before she was someone who could look through me, she was my world. Claire was born on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, when the hospital windows still wore their winter condensation. I remember the way her tiny hand gripped my finger like she had already decided. One belonged to her, and I did. For years, I belonged nowhere else. Her father left before her second birthday. He had that restless way about him, always looking past us towards some dream that never quite came true. I remember he kissed her forehead, said he was going to the store, and never came back. After that, it was just us, me and Claire. I worked mornings at the library, evenings cleaning offices. We lived in a rental house where the walls flaked with every season, but I kept it tidy and warm. I made paper snowflakes in the winter and little pink cakes for her birthday. Even when money was tight, she always had a costume for school plays. I always sat in the front row. I didn't date. Not seriously. I told myself I didn't have time. But the truth is, I didn't want anyone getting between me and her. She was my reason to wake up. My joy, my focus. I gave her everything I had, even when it cost me sleep or rent or a proper meal. There was a year when she got sick, fourth grade pneumonia. I slept upright in the hospital chair for 5 nights, crocheting a scarf I never finished. Her cheeks were pale, and her little fingers curled in mine like she was holding on for life. And I held on, too. After she got better, I started tucking notes in her lunchbox. Little lines from poems, or just "I love you, Mom is proud." She never mentioned them, but she never threw them out either. I'd find them tucked in her books or jacket pockets months later. As she grew, I adjusted my shape to fit around her. Teen years were harder. She had moods I couldn't reach and silences I didn't know how to break. But I gave her space. I didn't punish her when she slammed her door. I'd just leave warm food outside and wait until she was ready. When she brought home that first heartbreak, I think his name was Ethan, I sat with her on the kitchen floor and let her sob into my lap until the tile turned cold beneath us. I never said "I told you so," even though I had. She moved back in after college just for a year. She said 1 year became 3. She was trying to find work in the city, and I didn't mind. It felt like the house had a heartbeat again. She would come home late and tell me about her day. Coworkers she couldn't stand, deadlines she barely met. I'd pour tea and just listen. She still wore the slippers I gave her that Christmas. She still let me fold her laundry. Then she met Eric. He had a clean smile and expensive shoes. And from the start, I could feel it. He looked at me like I was a relic, like I came with the house, not as someone who built it. But Claire beamed around him. She laughed in a way I hadn't seen in years. And when she told me they were getting married, I bit my tongue about how fast it was. I sewed her dress hem myself, sat through fittings, nodding and smiling. Though it all felt a little too brittle to hurry, they didn't move out, said it was more practical to stay until they saved. I agreed. I always agreed. I let them turn the den into his office. Let him install locks on cabinets I used to keep my baking tins in. Told myself it was temporary, that love required patience, that mothers don't pull the rug out when their daughters are still learning to stand. She changed gradually in increments too small to panic over. Fewer thank yous, more instructions. A tone in her voice that edged toward irritation. When I reminded her about bills or appointments, at first, I blamed myself. Thought I was clinging too tight, hovering. So I stepped back, tried to be helpful but invisible. I remember one afternoon last fall. I left a peach cobbler on the counter. She came home from work, looked at it, and said, "That's too sweet. We don't eat like that anymore." We, as if I wasn't included in the sentence. I scraped the plate into the bin while she showered and told myself not to cry. Then came the passwords. One day the Wi-Fi stopped working for me. And when I asked, Eric said they'd changed it. Said they'd send it to me later. Later never came. The printer wouldn't let me in either. Then the grocery list stopped including my yogurt. Little things, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. But they stack like paper cuts. I think I knew before she ever said it. Knew I was being moved out without a suitcase, erased slowly so. I wouldn't protest. I clung to the comfort of routines, the quiet rhythm of my chores. I told myself they needed space, that it was still my home too. But then came the night she raised her voice. You're the problem, for words and everything fell into place. All the small rejections, all the closed doors and locked drawers. It wasn't about space. It was about making me feel I didn't belong. I didn't cry that night. I haven't cried since. Instead, I started remembering things I had forgotten. That my name was still on the deed. That I had rights. That I kept careful records all these years. Bank transfers, property taxes, notarized receipts. Legal copies tucked away in my sewing cabinet under the old thread spools. And I remembered something else, too. Eric had given me power of attorney for a short time after his surgery last year, just in case. He'd never taken it back. That was when the idea came. Not revenge, just release. Not from them. From the version of me who had let it go on so long. It was a Tuesday morning. Rain tapped against the kitchen window like it had somewhere to be. I'd just made coffee my own pot. Since they'd started buying those flavored pods I couldn't stand, and sat down at the table with the same blue notebook I'd used since Claire was 12. That notebook held everything: copies of bills I helped pay, notes from doctors, even letters I'd written to myself, long before I knew I'd ever need them. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just wanted to feel anchored, to remind myself I wasn't imagining it all, the slow removal, the quiet erasure. But something made me open the bottom drawer of a sideboard, the one they thought I never used. Inside was a stack of mail, mostly bills, some junk. But one envelope caught my eye: thicker paper, formal seal, addressed to Claire and Eric both. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The return address was their lawyer's office, the same one they'd used for the marriage license. I waited until they left that evening dinner with friends. I think I sat at her desk like a stranger breaking into their own house. Her laptop was open. She rarely logged out. It felt wrong, but I did it anyway. My hands trembled, not from guilt, but from something deeper: fear. Maybe, or instinct, the quiet kind that knows when it's about to find the truth it's been avoiding. I searched her folders, not the obvious ones. Claire was always meticulous, but I knew her patterns. How she named files with underscores and lowercase letters. How she saved backups in cloud drives she assumed I'd never think to check. It was there, in a folder marked refinance _options _2024, the deed, my name, removed, a clean copy. Their names only, the signature, forged. I stared at it for a long time, my hand, supposedly, signing away everything. No notary stamp, no witness line, just my name, scrawled in a way that mimicked my handwriting imperfectly. I didn't feel the betrayal in one sharp stab. It came like cold water rising up your ankles, slow, inescapable, drowning by degrees. I traced the signature with my finger. Not for confirmation. I knew I hadn't signed it. I just wanted to touch the moment they decided I didn't matter. They hadn't told me, hadn't asked. They'd just rewritten the truth as if I'd never been part of it, as if the walls hadn't known my laughter, as if the floors hadn't creaked beneath my feet for 3 decades, as if I hadn't wiped that very keyboard clean after Claire spilled tea on it last Christmas. That's what hurt the most, not the legality, not even the theft, but the rewriting, the quiet revision of history that turned me into an invisible woman. I closed the file, cleared my traces, sat back in the chair that used to be mine before he replaced it with something modern and cold. And I thought, she would have let this happen. She knew. Maybe not the forgery, but the intent. She knew they wanted me out, and she let it bloom. Like mold under the wallpaper, slowly, quietly. I didn't confront her. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't be turned into noise. Instead, I watched. I watched how she looked away when I entered a room. How she answered in half sentences. How he stopped calling me mom and started calling me Marion, with that polite edge that cuts more than cruelty ever could. I listened to the hum of their new life, one room away, where my chair didn't fit. And my voice wasn't required, they were already rehearsing my absence. I could hear it in the laughter that no longer included me. I stopped baking, stopped folding their towels, stopped asking about their day. They didn't notice. One evening, I took my cup of tea out to the backyard, the same yard I had planted daffodils in when Claire was a child. She used to help me dig holes, her fingers caked with dirt, squealing at worms. Now the flowers bloomed without her ever noticing. That night, under the porch light, I made a decision, not to fight to disappear the way they wanted, but on my terms, with my name intact and with the quiet dignity they thought they'd taken. The next morning, I called the lawyer I'd used after her father left. A quiet woman with a sharper memory than anyone I'd ever met. She listened as I read her the forged signature. She didn't gasp, didn't offer pity, just said, "Come in, bring everything," and I did. I brought the notebook, the notarized copies of the original deed, the text from Claire that referred to shared ownership, the email from Eric confirming my authority during his medical leave. I didn't tell them I was going. I packed while they were out, took only what was mine, left the wedding china, the sofa cushions, the decorative pillows Claire bought after watching some home makeover show. I took my teacup, my blanket, my photos, the ones with real smiles, and I left something, too, a copy of the real deed. Paper clipped to a simple note. I remember what I signed, and what I did in single quotes T. No signature. Just that dot. By the time they got home, I was gone. I didn't cry until the third night in the motel. Not the first, when the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I had no one to call. Not the second, when I sat in the plastic chair by the window and ate soup from a paper cup, watching the parking lot flicker under a broken neon sign. But the third, that's when it hit me, not what I lost, but how long I'd stayed, waiting to be wanted. That's a different kind of grief, the slow kind. The kind that builds up in your chest like dust in a room no one opens anymore. I'd booked the room under my maiden name, Marion Elwood. I hadn't seen that name in years. It looked strange on the check-in form, like an old friend I hadn't spoken to in decades. I wrote it slowly, as if learning to spell it again. Something about it made me feel real, whole, separate. I kept the curtains closed those first few days. Not because I was hiding, but because I needed the quiet. I lived too long in rooms where my silence was mistaken for consent. In that little room, with its humming fridge and scratchy blankets, no one expected anything from me. No meals, no errands, no smile held up like armor. I had nothing but time. I started reading again. Books I carried for years but never opened. I took slow walks along the sidewalk by the gas station, then further past the edge of town where the road gets soft with gravel. I picked up a fallen pecan shell and turned it over in my hand like a charm. It was cracked down the middle, empty, but still shaped like something whole. That's how I felt. Not broken, just emptied out, hollow. But in that hollowness, something new started to echo. My own voice. It came first in little things. Asking for extra towels without apology. Saying no thank you when someone offered help I didn't need. Eating what I wanted when I wanted and not thinking whether someone else might judge it. Then, slowly, it came in bigger ways. I called the lawyer again, asked questions, took notes. Made a list of every document that still carried my name and every one that had been tampered with. I wrote it all in a fresh notebook, the red one, spiral-bound, the kind students use. I bought it from the dollar store on a whim. It felt like something a person starting over would carry. I didn't make plans to go back. That part was already decided. I walked out the front door of a house I helped build and I hadn't once looked back. What I was deciding now wasn't about them. It was about me. Who I was if I wasn't Claire's mother anymore. That was the hardest thought to hold. Not because I stopped loving her. I haven't. I don't think I ever will. But because love is not the same as permission, and somewhere along the line, she learned that I would never leave. That no matter what she said or signed, I would stay. And for too long, I proved her right. It wasn't just Claire. It was the world she belonged to. That shiny, orderly world where people like me, older, quieter, unpaid, are just background. We're welcome only if we don't take up space. But I remember who I was before the house, before Eric, before the laundry and the list and the soft-stepped obedience of motherhood. I was clever. I was capable. And I was never anyone's burden. I began to write letters, not to send, just to release. One to Claire. One to her father. One to the girl I used to be before either of them entered my life. I wrote slowly, in longhand, as if the shape of the words mattered more than the grammar. I told the truth in each of them, not cruelly, just plainly. You treated my love like furniture, useful until it's in the way. And then I burned the letters in the metal ashtray by the sink. Piece by piece, the paper curled in silence, no ceremony, just release. I bought a box of dye and colored my hair a soft gray, not to hide the white, but to even it, to make it mine again. I clipped it short with shaky hands and cried, not because it looked bad, but because I looked like Someone else. Someone I wanted to meet. On the sixth morning, I woke up before the alarm I didn't set. The light through the curtains was soft. I made tea with the motel kettle and sat on the bed, knees drawn up like I used to do as a girl. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. They didn't just try to take the house. They tried to take the version of me that believed in myself, but they didn't succeed. I still had my name, I still had the truth, and I still had time to be something more than what they left behind. So I picked up the phone. Not to call them, I didn't owe them my voice anymore. I called the county office, I called the bank, I called the notary, I made appointments, I asked hard questions. I used the phrase legal recourse, and I said it like I meant it, not to fight, but to claim my place, my voice, my peace. The motel room didn't feel small anymore. It felt earned. The clerk at the courthouse didn't look up when I handed over the documents, just took them, shuffled through the copies, and said it would take a few weeks to process. Her voice was flat, practiced. She didn't know what those papers meant to me. She didn't need to. They were clean copies, originals where I had signed. In blue ink, initials careful, every page dated. I kept them in a folder for years, never expecting to need them. But something in me, maybe the part that had lived through her father leaving, through single paychecks and late nights at the laundromat, had known better. Had prepared. After the courthouse, I went to the storage unit. I'd rented it the same week I left. A small one, just 10 by 10, but it felt like a vault. I packed boxes slowly. Back when I was still in the house, pretending to sort winter clothes or organize the attic, I labeled them in KITCH1, BOOKS2. Things I knew they wouldn't care to open. Inside those boxes were the pieces of me they hadn't noticed going missing. My mother's china set, wrapped in old towels, the blue quilt I stitched when Claire was a baby, frayed at the corners, my high school yearbook, 3 small photo albums, one unopened box of perfume I'd been saving for Sunday. That day, I opened it, sprayed it once onto my wrist, let it linger. It smelled like gardenia, and something warmer underneath, like old cedar, or maybe memory. From the storage unit, I drove out of town, not far, just enough that the road changed color. Enough to feel like I was leaving something behind. I stopped at a notary's office tucked between a dry cleaner and a locksmith. It smelled like ink and laminate. I handed over the documents I'd drawn up with my lawyer revocation forms, updates, notices. Everything clean, precise, legal. Eric's name was gone now, Claire's too. The house was no longer theirs to control. They had tried to erase me from it, but they had done it without process, without permission, without truth. And now, I had returned the favor, only I'd done it properly, thoroughly. And above board, I didn't leave with anger. I left with receipts after the papers were stamped and sealed. I drove back to the motel and sat in the car a while, watching the late afternoon sun bend across the dashboard. There was a man in the parking lot fixing the vending machine, a girl on the second floor walkway sweeping leaves into ADUSTPAN. No one looked at me. No one knew who I was, and it felt like the first breath after being underwater. I opened the glove compartment and took out the notebook. Red, spiral-bound, corners already curling. I wrote one sentence on a new page. I am the keeper of my own name. Then I locked it back inside. That evening, I went to the local library, not the one where I used to work, a smaller one, quieter. I asked for the public computer, sat down and typed slowly, carefully, a new bank account, a P.O. box, updated beneficiaries, changed emergency contacts, deleted old accounts that still had my daughter's number listed under family. No more forwarding, no more fallback. I made myself my own emergency. Later that week, I visited the credit union and moved the remaining money from the shared account to one only I could touch. It wasn't much, but it was mine, money from years of birthdays, small inheritances, odd jobs I did while Claire was in high school. I had never touched it because it was meant for a future. Now I knew that future was me. I cashed out the small savings bond her father had left behind in a folder I found years after he disappeared. He'd written her name on the outside, but inside, tucked between the pages, was a note that said, "In case she ever needs to start over." I smiled at that. Maybe he wasn't all wrong. I started carrying a small purse again, not the big utility bags I used when I was a mother who needed to be ready for every scraped knee, every forgotten snack, just something small, enough for a wallet, a pen, a lipstick I hadn't worn in a decade. In the mornings, I took walks before sunrise. The world felt cleaner then, unclaimed. One morning, I passed a cafe just opening for the day. A woman about my age was unlocking the front door. She had short gray hair and a crooked smile. We nodded politely. The next day, I stopped in. She served me coffee in a chipped mug and asked where I was from. Nowhere in particular, I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. We talked about nothing for half an hour. Weather, The strange way people order eggs, the best kind of biscuit for jam. She didn't ask about family. Didn't assume anything, just talked with me like I was there. I started coming back, little by little. A week later, she handed me a folded apron and said, if you ever want to help out. Mornings get busy. I said maybe. But we both knew what I meant. I didn't tell her about the house. Or Claire or the forged signature because that's not the story I want to lead with anymore. Let them tell theirs. Let them explain why their mother no longer answers calls or comments or card invitations. Let them twist their own version of what happened. Mine is written in clean ink. Notarized and sealed. Mine lives in the quiet. In the small mailbox with only my name on it. In the keys in my pocket. In the sound of a kettle boiling in a room that no longer has to whisper around anyone else's moods. This is the exit I chose. No. Slammed doors. Just the soft sound of my own footsteps. Walking toward a life that doesn't ask me to shrink. It started with a voicemail. Claire's voice. Brittle with effort, trying not to sound shaken. Hi mom, just calling to check in. Just let me know you're okay? There was a silence after she said it. I could hear her trying to decide if she should say more. She didn't. The message ended with a clipped beep. No, I love you. No apology. Just okay. By then, the papers had already been filed. Titles returned. My name restored. Their names removed. I listened to that message twice. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to steady the tone. Claire always had a way of trying to sound composed when she was cornered, like control could substitute for truth. 3 hours later, Eric called. His voice was different, harder, louder. To casual by half. Hey Marian, look, we noticed you left some things unresolved. Not sure if there was a misunderstanding, but maybe we should talk before any mistakes get formalized. Mistakes, that's what he called it. Not fraud, not forging a name on a house deed. Not deliberately pushing me out of the home I paid for and protected for 3 decades, a mistake. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in the chair by the motel window and watched the sky burn its way into dusk. The silence felt earned. A kind of armor. You spend enough years being spoken over, and one day, quiet becomes your language. The next day, there were texts. Claire again. Mom, can we talk, please? Then a string of them, minutes apart. Eric's lawyer is saying something changed with the title. I'm confused. Can you call me? I didn't. I'd already had the call that mattered with the county registrar. The title clerk, the woman at the notary's office who'd said was soft finality. Well, that will make things clear. 2 days after the text came the email. Longer, formal. Subject, urgent, request for clarifications. Attached a PDF of the title. My name, bold and sharp. Right where it had always belonged, her name, gone. The email was a mess of contradictions. She said she was shocked, said she didn't understand. Said she thought I had agreed, said Eric had handled it, said it must have been a mix-up, said we needed to talk before things got more complicated. That last part made me pause. More complicated. It was never complicated for them when they left me out of decisions. Never complicated when they changed locks or passwords, or routines without asking. But now that their version of the story was unraveling, now it was urgent. Now it was complicated. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things don't require confrontation. They just need correction. I imagined them pacing the hallway of that house. The same hallway Claire used to run down in socks, sliding until she crashed into the laundry basket. I pictured her standing in the doorway of my old room, seeing the bare shelves, the missing blankets, the absence shaped exactly like me. I knew they'd try to find me. Claire would ask around, call friends, dig through old addresses, maybe even go by the library, see if anyone knew where I'd gone. But I had no digital trail, no updated profile, no online presence. I'd been silent for years, and now that silence served me. At the motel, the staff didn't ask questions. I paid in cash, tipped in kindness. One of the maids, a soft-eyed girl with chipped nail polish, started leaving little extras in my room, a wrapped pastry, an extra set of towels. I think she sensed something. One morning, I found a note on the bedside table, written in blue ink. Hope today is gentle. It was the first time in weeks someone had spoken to me without needing anything in return. Meanwhile, the fallout grew louder. Claire left another voicemail, her voice cracking near the end. I don't know what you think we did, but if this is about the refinance, we were just trying to make things easier. You didn't have to disappear. That word again. Disappear. As if I was the one who vanished first. They wanted the benefits of me without the burden. They wanted the house without the woman who made it a home. And now, without me there to absorb the consequences, their tidy life was showing, it seems. I heard from a friend, a neighbor from 2 streets over, who emailed me from her new address. Unaware that I'd left everything behind, she said Claire had shown up on her porch, pale and frantic, asking if she'd seen me, said there'd been a scene. That Eric drove by twice in one evening. That their new refinance was denied, I imagined the chaos, and it didn't thrill me. It just confirmed everything I already knew. They were counting on my silence. And now, in my absence, it was turning on them. One night, I opened my old phone, the one I hadn't touched since I walked out. The screen lit up with missed calls, 20-7.voicemails. Emails, one from Eric's lawyer. Thinly veiled, we'd like to avoid escalation. Please contact us directly to avoid unnecessary complications. I deleted it all. Sad. Back. Exhaled. That was the moment I knew I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Not of their voices, their pleas, their polished apologies. Not of their panic. They were unraveling. And I wasn't even in the room. I took the SIM card out of the phone, dropped it into the motel waste bin. It landed with a soft, final sound. Then I picked up the kettle and poured myself another cup of tea. No sugar, no sweetener. Just the bitter taste I'd grown used to, and for the first time, it was enough. I didn't expect peace to find me where I did, not in a town too small to have traffic lights with streets that seemed to sleep most of the day, and a single grocery store where everyone knew your name before you said it. But it found me anyway. I signed the lease on a small apartment above a bakery. It wasn't much, bare walls, a little kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon, and a window that looked out onto the corner where the paper boy left the morning papers. But it was mine to fill, mine to breathe in, no keys held by anyone else. No name signed without me. The days settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I woke with the sun, brewed strong tea in a chipped mug I'd brought from the motel, and walked to the bakery before it opened. The owner, a woman named June, always saved me the last warm croissant, and we shared stories while the ovens warmed. She had a way of listening that didn't expect anything in return, just presence. One afternoon, a little girl came in with her mother. The girl wore a bright yellow raincoat and shy eyes. She stared at me for a moment, then tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered something. The mother smiled at me and said, "You look like someone who's seen a lot." The girl added, "But you're still kind." It was the first time I felt seen, not as a problem, not as a burden, but as someone whole. I started volunteering at the community garden. It was a patch of earth behind the library, tended by people who grew tomatoes and sunflowers and dreams in equal measure. My hands, stiff from years of neglect, learned to dig again. I planted seeds, watered seedlings, and watched tiny green shoots push their way through the soil. One of the gardeners was a man named Tom. He had a quiet smile and a steady way about him. We worked side by side, sharing the easy silence of people who don't need to fill every moment with words. One morning, he handed me a small jar of honey and said, "For you, for sweetness you deserve." I kept it on my windowsill, where the sun caught the amber light and made it glow like something sacred. Some days were harder than others. I thought about Claire, about the life I'd left behind. I thought about the house, the forged signature, the words that made me invisible. But those thoughts didn't hurt as much anymore. They were like old wounds, scarred, faded, part of the map that led me here. I wrote letters, still, not to send, but to remind myself who I was becoming. I wrote about the quiet moments, the first spring crocus breaking through the frost, the way the light bent through the kitchen window at dawn, the kindness of strangers who became friends. One letter was to my own reflection. In the cracked bathroom mirror, I told her she was brave, even when she didn't feel it, that she deserved kindness, that she was more than the sum of broken promises. Slowly, I reclaimed my laughter. It came back in small bursts, watching a dog chase its tail, reading a poem that caught me by surprise, hearing a song on the radio that made my feet tap without thinking. I stopped apologizing for my presence. I made new routines, Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, Wednesday afternoons reading in the park, Friday nights cooking simple meals and eating them with no one but the cat I named Daisy. Daisy, who liked to curl up on my lap and purr through the quiet nights. I found joy in the ordinary, in the sun warming my face, in the smell of fresh bread, in the soft hum of life moving forward. I never forgot where I came from, but I didn't live there anymore. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand gestures. It slips in like a gentle tide, reshaping the shore slowly, quietly, until the landscape looks different, but the essence is still true. This new life wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing. Choosing to be seen, choosing to be whole, choosing to live without apology. And in that choice, I found something precious. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. The knock came late in the afternoon, just as I was finishing a cup of tea. I wasn't expecting anyone. The apartment was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of children playing outside. I stood up slowly, smoothing my skirt, and opened the door. There she was, Claire. Her eyes were tired, but not angry. Not like before. She looked smaller somehow, Like the weight of what she carried had shrunk her down. I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. She said, "I'm sorry." The words were simple, plain, no drama, no demand, just a quiet admission of a crack in the wall. I let her speak. She told me about the mistakes she made, about the ways she thought she was protecting me by pushing me away, about the fear she had of losing everything, of being vulnerable. She said she never meant to erase me, only to survive. I listened. Inside, a part of me wanted to reach out, to say it was okay, that I understood more than she knew. But the years had taught me something else, that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about knowing you're worth enough to set the terms. I said, "I heard you, that's all." She nodded. I told her, "Some things can't be undone, some doors stay closed." She looked down, then back up, eyes clear. "I'm not asking to come back, I just wanted you to know." That was the moment I knew the past was really behind me. Not because the apology was perfect, but because it was enough. Not because I welcomed her back into my life, but because I welcomed peace back into my heart. She turned to leave. I closed the door gently. And walked to the window. The sky was soft with the colors of evening. I breathed in the quiet and finally felt it settle. The weight of years. Lifted. Some evenings, when the sky turns that strange, forgiving shade of lavender, I sit on the porch with Daisy curled by my feet and think about the woman I used to be. The one who said yes too easily, who waited for permission to speak, who let her love be taken like water from a well that never ran dry. I don't hate her. She kept me alive. She kept my daughter fed, clothed, safe. She stayed up through fevers and heartbreaks. She bent herself so many times she forgot what shape she used to be. But she was loyal and brave, even in her silence. Still, I don't want to be her anymore. I used to think motherhood meant disappearing. That love looked like sacrifice without end, that being good meant being quiet, agreeable, grateful just to be allowed in the room. But I've learned something since then. Love given without respect is a noble. It's just a slow kind of dying. I didn't leave because I stopped loving Claire. I left because I finally started loving myself. The difference is everything. The apartment is small, but it fits me. I hung new curtains last week, yellow, soft like morning light. I put up a shelf of my books, the ones I never had time to reread when I was always folding someone else's laundry or waiting for someone to notice. I gone quiet. On the counter, there's a glass jar filled with shells. I started collecting them on my walks, little ones, chipped ones, the kind no one picks up because they're not whole, but they're beautiful to me. Proof that you can be broken and still belong somewhere. I still haven't told many people where I am. A few letters, here and there, the kind that don't ask for anything, just "I'm safe, I'm well, please don't worry." Claire hasn't written again. She hasn't called. I think she finally understood that this wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. I still wear the locket she gave me when she was 8, plastic and gold painted, with a tiny photo inside, me, smiling, her, missing a front tooth. It's faded now, the edges curling. But I keep it, not for what we lost, for what we once had. Before the world taught her to climb in a race, to conquer and forget. Forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else. It's a path you walk alone toward yourself. I've forgiven her, but I won't go back. Some people confuse reunion with healing. But not everything that's broken needs to be glued back together. Some things need to be laid down gently, blessed, and left behind. The cat stretches beside me now, paws in the air, belly soft and unworried. The sky outside darkens to a deep, peaceful blue. I light a candle on the windowsill, not for ritual, just for light, the kind that makes shadows kinder. I write letters still, but mostly to myself now. Yesterday, I wrote, "You were never too much. You were simply in the wrong hands." Sometimes I tuck these letters into books at the library, leave them where someone else might find them one day. A woman who's too tired, too unheard, too scared to walk. Maybe she'll read my words and know she isn't alone. I hope so. I hope my silence teaches her how to listen to herself. I keep a copy of the old deed in my drawer, not out of spite, just as a reminder that I didn't imagine it, that it happened, that I survived, that I left, and that leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Tomorrow, I'll plant something on the windowsill, basil, maybe, or rosemary, something small and fragrant, something that reminds me to keep growing even here, even now, because I am still becoming, not a mother, not a wife, just a woman. Whole. Seen. Free. This time, I decide who gets to call me anything else.